Good morning everyone. In this lesson we're going to be learning some terminology that's going to help us explain our angle calculations. So in this lesson we're going to learn 3 new words that we can use to explain what we're doing in an exam. Okay, so the first of those 3 is coming up. So corresponding angles. So these are pairs of angles which are on the same side of the transversal and the parallel line, and corresponding angles are always equal. I'm going to show you lots of examples in case that didn't make too much sense to you, and I'm going to explain why this pair of angles are corresponding. So both of these angles, they are to the right of that transversal line. So the transversal line is this kind of diagonal line here. They're both to the right of it, and they're also below the parallel line. So they're both on the bottom right of these 4 angles. So they're corresponding. So look at this next pair of corresponding angles. Do we see that they are both to the left side of the parallel lines, and they are also both below the transversal line? So the transversal line in this case is the horizontal one. So they are both on the bottom left of those 4 angles around those points. So they're both on the bottom left, so they're corresponding. Okay, and then have a look at this last one. I wonder if you can think to yourself, why are these 2 angles corresponding? Think about how we defined it. Well, do we see that both of these pair of angles, they are both above the parallel lines, and they are also both to the right of that transversal line. So because they are both on the top right of these 4 angles around a point, they are corresponding. And a lot of people talk about something called like the F test. So do we see, for example, in this first diagram, do we see like these bolder black lines? They kind of form an F shape. Well, some people remember corresponding angles by thinking of them as F angles. So if you can make the letter F with these angles, they're corresponding angles. This one, it doesn't look like an F shape yet, but if you tilt your head 90 degrees to the right, which I'm doing now, you will be able to see that it kind of forms an F shape. So these bolder lines form an F shape. And then this one, you're going to have to tilt your head 100 degrees. You would have to tilt your head upside down, and I'm not doing that. But you're welcome to try, or spin your laptop upside down if you want, but it will make an F shape if you look at this image upside down. So if those angles form an F shape, they're corresponding. So for our first task today, we're going to be deciding, are the pairs of angles on our screen corresponding? And we're answering yes or no. So I'm going to do 4, and then you're going to move on to task 1 on your worksheet. So stay with me for now. Let's do these 4 together. So are these angles corresponding? Well, they are both above those parallel lines. So here are my 2 parallel lines. They're both above the parallel lines, and they're both to the left of that transversal, so that line that cuts the 2 parallel lines. So I'm going to say yes, they are corresponding. Let's think about the second one. Are these angles corresponding? Well, they are both below the parallel lines, and also they are both to the right, or I guess underneath, that transversal line. So yes, they are corresponding. Question 3, so let's do this one. Are these angles corresponding? Well, have a look at my parallel lines first. So my parallel lines are those lines that would never meet. Both of these angles are below the parallel lines, and also they are both to the left of this transversal line. So yes, these are corresponding angles. They're both 55 degrees. They must be equal. Corresponding angles are equal. Last one. So question 4. Okay, so here's my transversal line. So this kind of diagonal line. Well, both angles are to the right of this transversal line. However, think about these 2 parallel lines. So these 2 black lines here. One of these angles is below the parallel lines, but one of these angles is above the parallel lines. So we could say these angles are not corresponding, because if they're corresponding, they have to be the same side of the parallel lines and the same side of the other line, the transversal. Okay, so have a go at task 1 on your worksheet. Spend about 5 minutes on that, please. So do as many as you can in 5 minutes, and your answers are on the sheet as well. Okay, so the second definition of 3 that we're going to learn today, we're going to be thinking about alternate angles. So by alternate angles, we mean angles on either side of the transversal line, and alternate angles are also equal. Here's our first example. So my transversal line, remember it's that line that cuts the parallel lines. And do we see that both of these angles, they're kind of like sandwiched between that transversal line and the parallel lines, but on opposite sides. So this first angle is to the left of the transversal line, and this angle is to the right of the transversal line. So they're on alternate sides, they're on different sides, but still sandwiched between those two parallel lines. Okay, so next one. So sometimes they'll look like this. So again, I have my transversal line. One is to the right of the transversal line, and one is to the left of the transversal line. Because they're on alternate sides of the transversal line, they are alternate angles and they are equal. So, even if the parallel lines are span round in a different direction, these angles are still the same. Do you actually notice this third example, it's identical to the first example, it's just span around a bit. Do you see that? Okay, so that's 76 degrees. Well, one is above the transversal, one is below the transversal because they're on alternate, so different sides of that transversal line that are equal and alternate angles. And then the last one, so again, one's above the transversal, one's below the transversal because they're on alternate, so different sides sandwiched between those parallel lines. We say they're alternate angles. And some people like to say, well, the Z test. Some people say, well, these look like Z angles. So do we see this black bold line? It kind of looks like a Z shape, doesn't it? If it makes that Z shape, so if your two angles make a Z shape, you can say that they're alternate angles. So this one, it's not always a perfect Z. This is almost like an S, isn't it? So sometimes that Z shape will be backwards, and sometimes it'll be stretched out a bit, but that's absolutely fine. So to see the Z shape in that third example, you would have to tilt your head to the right a bit, and then in that fourth example, it's just the same as the second one, but just span around. It's just a kind of stretched out S shape. Okay, so please can you have a go at task 2? So you need to tell me, are these pairs of angles alternate angles, yes or no? Okay, so last definition before I get you onto task 3, we need to know what co-interior angles are. So these are angles that lie between the two lines and on the same side of the transversal. So they lie between the parallel lines, that should say, and also they add up to 180 degrees. So, for example, this angle here and this angle here, so where I'm looking at my cursor, do we see that they're both between the parallel lines? And they're both on the same side of that transversal. So this one's to the left of the transversal and this one's to the left of the transversal as well, and they're between the parallel lines. On the one on the right, do we see, okay, so they're both between the parallel lines and both of them are to the right of the transversal. Okay, and some people say we'll try the C test. So C test, just some people say, well, it kind of looks like a C shape. Look at this second diagram. It looks like a kind of square letter C. So it kind of looks like the letter C where they've highlighted it in blue. And sometimes that C shape will be backwards, but the rule still applies. They're called co-interior angles and they add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so task 3 on your worksheet, you have an image with some angles labelled with letters. What you need to do for each row, one of them is correct, one of them is incorrect. You need to decide which one's right and so on. So I'll talk you through the first one just so we know what we're doing. So A and C, let's look at these two angles A and C. Well, let's find them. So A and C are here. So I need to decide, well, do they either add up to 180 degrees or are they vertically opposite? Well, I can see these angles, they are opposite each other with two perfectly straight lines intersecting, so they are vertically opposite. Okay, so for task 3, for each row, you're just going to choose which one is the correct answer.